Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. In this episode we're going to examine what led to the breakthrough in the Heidi Broussard case. It's been asked sort of all over the place, what led the police to Fieramusca's Houston area home on Thursday night. What gave the FBI and the Austin police their vital clue? What led them to this residence? Another aspect that I want to deal with is in the previous episode I spoke about the rarity of infant abduction and how it's the only kind of abduction where a woman is involved. Now this isn't only a female, an infant abduction. It's important to stress that. You can clearly see a woman had to have been involved because of the infant abduction and the fact that the child was still alive. But the fact that the mother was also abducted and the mother was killed suggests that there could be another party involved. So what I'm trying to say is there's clearly a woman involved in this, and we know who that is. We know it's Maygen. And then there's also the possibility that there's a male involved, and we know there's a second person in custody who they don't want to identify. Now I don't want to be too specific in this episode on what I'm trying to get at, but I think it's obvious that couple of things, that Maygen lived at the address on Bojack Drive. She lived in the address for 3 years, and I think she'd been living with another individual, the landlord, who'd had the property I think since 2015, so almost 5 years. According to Christopher Green's mother, the landlord's mother, Maygen never paid any rent, so she was staying there rent free, and this seems to suggest some kind of relationship. If you're staying with someone for rent without paying rent, what does that kind of involve? And if you take that scenario further and you say, well, Maygen felt comfortable enough to bring not just the body home but the infant home, and so how was she going to explain either of those to a man that she was living with? How did she feel she was going to one could explain the pregnancy, the fake pregnancy, in a certain way, but how did she feel confident enough to bring the body home when someone else was living with her? So I think that's definitely something that needs to be acknowledged. What also needs to be acknowledged is Maygen is still claiming that the child is hers, which is why there's been a DNA test. And what's also kind of interesting is a guy involved in search operations in Texas, I think he's with EduSearch, Eric Miller, said she was very convincing. When she said the baby was hers, she was very, very convincing. There's a kind of obvious reason why certain people are convincing liars, and we'll get to that. But before we do, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Click the bell if you'd like to receive notifications. Like, share through your networks, and leave a comment. And let's get started. So from what I've been able to piece together, and I say this under the disclaimer that it's under correction, I'm still gathering information, still trying to piece it together, but it appears that the critical tip-off to the cops may have come from a mutual friend of both Heidi's and Maygen's, Carissa Nolte, or maybe Nolte. People magazine and other sources have posed a question, it's unclear what led the police to the to Maygen's home. We have seen a number of friends appearing on television and in the media. Frustratingly, they are seldom identified. There's seldom a caption saying who these people are. In the case of Carissa, it seems like she's at times referred to as Carissa Rachel and other times Carissa. There also seems to be a Cliff Nolte. But on NBC, looks like the closest that I've been able to find a photo of Carissa, and where she says she, meaning Maygen, really wanted the baby, and because she wanted the baby so much, that's why she took Heidi's baby. As reported on KHOU, Carissa apparently went on to J is for Justice, the YouTuber, and discussed her relationship, discussed the dynamics. The video is around about 5.5 hours long. I've got to admit I didn't watch or listen to more than about 10 minutes. Some of the regular Crime Rocket readers, I asked them to listen to it and analyze it, and they have, and you can head on over to crimerocket2.com for a summary of that 5.5 hour discussion. But what comes out of it, for me, the bottom line in it is, it appears that I think it was Carissa who called Maygen, and this was after Heidi's disappearance, and heard a baby crying in the background and asked her about it, and Maygen then answered that the baby was hers, and she said, well, the baby sounded sweet, and also that she'd given the baby the name Luna May. Carissa also goes on in the podcast with Jays for Justice about allegations of drug abuse by Heidi's former fiance, or fiance at the time. I'm not going to go into that here, but you can read about it on crimerocket2.com. There's also some talk about his behavior when Heidi was giving birth, and also the fact that Maygen was also present when she gave birth. They also attended prenatal class together. And so it makes complete sense that Carissa, who is mutual friends of both, would have been suspicious of Maygen under these circumstances. She said she'd never seen a photo before of Maygen's child, whereas I think she had met Margot, and she'd been with she was a colleague of Heidi's. So to me it makes sense that it was Carissa who actually tipped off the police. That's a True Crime Rocket Science theory. Could be wrong, but it just makes sense given what we know. Then the other aspect I want to address is EcuSearch's Tim Miller, who basically called Maygen, and she was really the first person that he called, and he just found Maygen to be very convincing. Maygen apparently told him that she would do everything that she could, and would it be okay if she called him if she got any information, and Miller was duped by her version of events. Miller then said that he couldn't believe how sincere she sounded. I think there's a simple explanation for why Miller was so easily misled. Someone who has lied their whole life, someone who's capable of lying about a pregnancy, when I say lying their whole life, I don't really mean like from childhood, I just mean for many years. And if the drug allegations are true, any person who's a regular user of drugs is going to be a fantastic liar, fantastically deceptive and misleading and deceitful. So that's one possible explanation. I'm not saying Maygen was. I'm just saying one explanation for someone being a very convincing liar is someone who's a regular drug user. That's all. Another reason is that Maygen had a huge incentive. If she'd gone to all this effort for so long, then she probably was very sincere about trying to keep the child in terms of that. So she would have an incentive to lie, to protect her own interests, to protect her fairy tale. The other reason that I believe there had to have been an accessory, or there must have been an accessory involved in this crime, was the fact that CCTV image has emerged. I haven't seen it, but it's been reported that Heidi willingly got into the car with Maygen. We don't know whether there was some kind of duress that's invisible, that you can't see on camera. We don't know if there was a gun on her or something, but what's likely, I think, is that she was led into the car through some kind of ruse. There could have been something as simple as an argument with Shane, and then she went to the vehicle to just get a break, just to not be sitting in the apartment or something. Or maybe Maygen said that, there's something I want to show you in the car. I've got a new car seat for my baby that I'm having, whatever it was. And under this ruse, Heidi was abducted. It's also possible someone else was in the car when Maygen approached the car. That's also possible. I've heard some reports that the seat in Heidi's car was far back, but to me that's irrelevant. It's whether the seat in Maygen's car was far back. On the other hand, maybe Maygen drove somewhere and the abduction sort of happened somewhere else and the car was driven back. That's also possible. Seems unlikely because that would have also been captured on the CCTV. And then a final thing I want to bring up is talk about, someone mentioned, I think one of the neighbors mentioned, they don't understand why this is happening, why is it happening at this time of the year, etc. The timing is always very important in crimes, in true crime. In this case, I think the timing is important for two or three reasons. The number one reason is that this crime had to coincide with the birth of Margot. So if it was a premeditated crime, then there was the baby had to be snatched kind of early on. And what it appears is the baby was snatched sort of a week or two after it was clear that the baby was viable, and when the opportunity arose to do that. So it was a combination of those two things. I think the third reason, which is going more into the fabric of human psychology, was it was the snatch happened on the 12th of December. It was literally about 2 weeks before Christmas, and a lot of people are thinking about that. Am I going to have a happy Christmas? Am I going to think about what Christmas is? It's the birth of baby Jesus. Am I going to have my little baby? Is there going to be a savior? Am I going to be saved? Am I going to have the fairy tale happily ever after that I want? And so as Christmas was approaching, this desperate move, this desperate action to seize this symbol of happily ever after, the baby, became urgent. And there's an image of baby Margot sort of wrapped in a colorful kind of cloth or sort of blanket, where she looks really almost divine. It just looks very very neat and sweet and in a way beautiful, and one can imagine if if Maygen saw that she, just this image of this baby looking beatific, she may have just felt this irresistible urge to do, to cross that line, to seize her. Like, she may have been planning it for a long time, but eventually that urge became, beyond temptation, just irresistible. And I guess the real question is, was this a fairy tale for one or for more than one? Bearing in mind there was a big house available, bearing in mind there was someone else in that house, and bearing in mind that if they were a couple, they were a young couple wanting to be a family just like all the other families on social media and out there. Another aspect I want to highlight is something that my ears alerted to, pricked up to during the press conferences of law enforcement, is despite all the information, despite having arrested Maygen but not charging her for murder, they were still requesting more information from the public. And so what this seems to me reinforce is that's how they originally made the breakthrough, and they're relying on more information on the public about the dynamics between everybody, between Heidi and Shane, between Heidi and Maygen, between Maygen and Christopher Green, between all the people that I've mentioned, sort of between one another. Some of the neighbors have started speaking, in terms of the neighbors in Houston. Some of the neighbors in Austin have spoken about a muffled row, which indicates another dimension to the whole thing. I just want to be clear that the spelling that I'm using on Crime Rocket is Maygen, which is the same spelling Heidi used, but I'll be pronouncing her name Maygen, not Maygen. And then finally, the fact that Christopher Green appears to appear on the baby registry with Maygen, I think is quite an important, it's an obvious artifact on social media, but I think it's also very, very critical. It may be, and another disclaimer, this is just speculation, but it may be that Christopher may play the role that the mistresses played in both the Chris Watts and Patrick Frazee case. We know there's a unnamed second person in custody, and who knows what this person is doing, and what kind of deal might be undertaken, but it does feel like there may be a kind of a mistress scenario involved, like these other cases, but in this case perhaps a male mistress or a male person providing the information. The key question, I guess, is at the end of the day, who actually committed this crime? At the end of the day, who actually committed the murder? I'm sure charges will be brought forward very, very soon. I'm surprised they haven't already, but incredibly, right now, at the time that I'm speaking, no one has been charged for murder in the death of Heidi Broussard. And it appears that paternity is going to be a very interesting and important aspect as well. Thank you for listening, and if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do, and I will see you guys next time.